To create the glass sea turtle, Raven Skyriver begins by collecting a large amount of molten glass into the tip of a blowpipe, using extremely high temperatures. Once the glass reaches the right temperature and consistency, he rolls specific areas of its surface in powdered colored glass and then in a white frit. This coloring technique helps to recreate the realistic textures and tones of a sea turtle's skin. The glass is reheated in a glory hole to keep it workable, then shaped with various hand tools to form the main body of the turtle. Once the body is shaped, the molten glass is carefully blown onto a pre-made turtle shell to create a body contour that fits the turtle shell. The piece is then placed in a furnace to keep it hot. Meanwhile, the pre-shaped, pre-sculpted turtle head is also kept hot in another chamber. Two large torches were used to heat the area around the shell, allowing Raven to use a steel tool to carve natural grooves into the surface of the shell, mimicking the texture of a real turtle. Excess glass was removed with water and pliers. Next, the tail of the turtle was shaped by reheating the body and using a blowtorch to soften the glass. Raven trimmed the tail with pliers, then returned the glass to the furnace for further heating. The heated head of the turtle was then removed and attached to the body. The blowtorch was directed at the joint, and Raven would notch the glass surface to strengthen the bond and add realistic detail. A specially prepared cup-shaped piece of glass was then burned and attached to the underside of the turtle's shell and tail. The rear fins and tail were also attached using the hot carving technique and a blowtorch. Finally, the front fins were fused to the shell, completing the figure. Once all parts are joined, the entire turtle sculpture is uniformly torch heated for a final time. Then, it is removed from the blowpipe using clamps and cutters. Finally, Raven, wearing protective gear, carries the completed sculpture to an annealing oven. There, it cools slowly over hours or days to relieve internal stress and ensure structural stability. To create the glass elephant with wings, the gaffer begins by gathering molten glass on a blowpipe. The glass is shaped on a marver and then flashed in the glory hole to keep it hot. The assistant performs a bench blow, gently inflating the glass while the gaffer shapes the body using jacks and a wooden paddle. The basic form of the elephant's torso is developed first. Another gather is added for the head, which is pulled and shaped with tweezers and diamond shears to form the trunk. The ears are made from flat gathers, stretched and flattened using paddles and tweezers, then attached to the sides of the head. The gaffer carefully flashes the piece to prevent thermal shock after each attachment. The legs are formed from small gathers and attached one by one using a punty. Each leg is positioned and shaped precisely before being secured. The tail is made from a thin strand of glass pulled with tweezers and attached at the back. Finally, the wings are sculpted from hot gathers, stretched and feathered with tweezers. They are attached to the elephant's back with careful reheating and alignment. After final shaping, the completed elephant is placed in the annealer to cool slowly and relieve internal stress. The process of shaping a glass horse at a Murano glass factory in Italy begins with gathering molten glass from the furnace. The artisan skillfully stretches and twists the material using hand tools and metal rods to form the horse's body, legs, and head. Each movement must be precise before the glass cools. Once the sculpture is completed, it is placed into a special oven at around 700 degrees Celsius. This annealing process is essential to gradually reduce internal stresses in the glass. The horse remains in the annealing oven for 24 hours to prevent thermal shock, which could otherwise cause it to explode once cooled. After this controlled cooling period, the glass horse is completely solidified and safe to handle, ready to be admired or sold. The process begins with Gianluca selecting colored glass rods, which are long rods of colored glass. These rods are twisted, stretched, and crafted into intricate patterns using techniques such as Murrine and Zanfirico, and arranged by hand on a heated metal plate. This plate serves as the base for creating the desired design. Each piece is carefully positioned to form a specific composition, which determines the final aesthetic of the glass object. While the pattern is being preheated to keep it soft and ready for fusing, Gianluca gathers molten clear glass from the furnace using a blowpipe. The temperature of the gather reaches approximately 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit. The gather is then rolled across the warm plate of pre-arranged glass fragments in what is known as the pickup process. The glass pieces instantly stick to the hot gather. Once collected, the piece is placed back into the glory hole, a reheating furnace, to ensure that the entire mass of glass reaches a workable temperature and becomes uniform in consistency. After reheating, Gianluca begins the shaping process. He carefully rolls and balances the molten glass on a marver, a flat steel surface, to achieve the correct symmetry. Throughout this process, he reheats the glass as needed, ensuring it remains soft but controlled. He uses traditional tools such as jacks, paddles, and tweezers to manipulate the form. He continues to blow gently into the pipe, expanding the bubble inside the glass while simultaneously shaping the outer form with his tools and gestures. Additional gathers of hot glass may be added to build up the piece's thickness or to add new design elements. Each time, the new layer must be skillfully fused to the existing structure without distorting the delicate patterns. As the vessel grows in size, the shaping becomes more complex. Vidal adjusts the axis of rotation and reheats specific sections to stretch or constrict the form. At a certain point, once the piece has reached a stable shape, the blowpipe is transferred to a punty rod. This switch allows him to work on the opposite end of the piece and refine the shape further. By rotating the piece on the new axis, he can introduce dynamic contours and intricate symmetry. Only highly skilled artists can control the material at this level of precision and fluidity. The glass-making process begins as the artisan gathers a glowing lump of molten glass from the furnace using a long, hollow metal tube. This orange hot mass is carefully rolled and shaped on a flat surface to form the initial body of the horse. Using swift and practiced movements, the artisan starts forming the basic shape. Once the general form is established, the artisan employs specialized tools, tweezers, and scissors to pull and pinch the glass, carefully crafting the four legs and elongating the neck. Timing is critical, as the glass cools quickly and becomes difficult to shape. To maintain workability, the piece is repeatedly reheated in the furnace. With the neck formed, the artisan uses tongs to stretch it upward. The preformed head is then attached to the top of the neck, and the connection is refined. Narrow pliers are used to sculpt the mane, adding realistic texture and dimension. Small scissors trim and define these intricate features. The horse's body is rotated constantly during shaping to ensure balance and uniformity. Each leg is extended downward, with the glass reheated between steps to keep it soft. The artisan works quickly to finalize the posture and proportions of the horse. Once all shaping is complete, the entire figure is reheated one final time before being placed back in the furnace to cool slowly and safely. The process of creating a glass horse begins when the glass blower gathers a small glob of molten glass on the end of a hollow metal blowpipe. This glowing orange material, heated to an extremely high temperature, must be kept hot and malleable throughout the process. To maintain its softness, the glass is repeatedly reheated in a nearby kiln while the pipe is constantly rotated to prevent deformation. Once the proper temperature and consistency are reached, the artist starts shaping the main body. Using heat-resistant metal scissors, he carefully pulls and stretches the soft glass to form an elongated shape resembling the horse's torso. The manipulation requires precision and constant motion, as any hesitation could cause the glass to cool and harden too quickly. Next, the artist works on the neck and head. He stretches the upper part of the body upward to form the neck, then gradually narrows the tip to shape the horse's head. Using small metal pliers, he pulls out the muzzle and defines the jawline with gentle, controlled movements. He then gathers a tiny bit of molten glass and attaches it to the top of the head to form one ear, shapes it quickly and cuts off the excess with scissors. He repeats the process on the other side for the second ear. The mane is added next. The artist gathers another portion of hot glass and attaches it along the upper neck. Using a combination of scissors and narrow pliers, he trims and texturizes the mane to give it flow and lifelike detail. Each strand is shaped individually to suggest motion. To create the legs, he gathers more molten glass and applies it to the underside of the horse's body. He pulls the glass down to form 4 legs, shaping the front legs first and bending them inward slightly to resemble a running posture. The back legs are pulled straight down. All legs are carefully sculpted and excess glass is trimmed. Finally, the tail is formed from a thin strand of molten glass attached to the rump. The artist pulls it outward with a clamp to give it a natural, dynamic curve, adding both elegance and stability to the completed glass horse figure. The process begins with the glass blower gathering a glob of molten orange glass from the furnace using the tip of a blowpipe. This glowing mass is gently rolled on a glass roller to cool the surface slightly and shape it into a uniform cylinder. The glass is then reheated in the furnace to maintain its workability. Once at the right temperature, the glass blower blows into the pipe while rotating it, expanding the glass into a hollow form. Next, excess glass is allowed to flow down as the pipe is rotated. The glass blower blows fire into a mold containing colored glass rods, preheating them. The hot, pliable glass is inserted into the mold and lifted out again, capturing the colored rods along its surface. Clamps are used to secure the rods more tightly to the glass body. The object is then rolled again on the glass roller to refine its shape. Using clamps and tweezers, the glass blower continues shaping the soft glass with great precision. The piece is reheated multiple times during this process to prevent it from cooling too quickly and becoming unworkable. The glass is again returned to the mold to ensure the long colored rods adhere properly. After another reheating, the artisan removes the piece and uses pliers and scissors to stretch, cut, and refine the design. Finally, fire is blown around the surface, and the glass is heated once more before being removed. The result is a fully formed glass artwork, shaped with impeccable timing and control while the material remains molten and glowing. The glassmaker begins by collecting molten glass at the end of the blowpipe. He rolls the glowing glass onto a cold glass table, shaping and cooling it to gain initial control. Once it is hard enough, he returns the piece of glass to the furnace to reheat and make it malleable again. Next, using a pair of precision tweezers, he gently stretches sections of the softened glass tube to form the horse's neck and head. Scissors are used to cut and shape the silhouette, separating sections to make the legs and refining the shape. After each adjustment, the glass is reheated in the furnace to maintain its pliability, ensuring smooth transitions and clean lines. Continuing with tweezers and scissors, he shapes the legs by pulling on thin strands of glass, then lifts and adjusts them to make the horse stand. He continues to trim and smooth the body, adjusting the proportions to balance the sculpture. Finally, the tail tip is pulled and refined. Once the overall pose and details are perfected, the glass horse is left to cool slowly. The process of making a glass horse begins with gathering molten glass onto a steel blowpipe from the furnace. The blowpipe is then rested on a stand to support the glass during shaping. Using a curved marver, the craftsman rolls and shapes the glass to refine its form and smooth out imperfections. By swinging and rotating the blowpipe, the glass is evenly distributed, and tweezers are used to shape the head. The ears and muzzle are pulled and formed next. The front legs are carefully drawn out, giving the horse a dynamic running posture. Each leg is shaped individually by stretching the glass with tweezers. The hind legs are then formed in the same manner. Lastly, the tail is created by stretching the molten glass and cutting off the excess. After shaping is complete, the figure is annealed to relieve internal stress, resulting in a finished, delicate glass horse. The blowpipe holding molten glass is placed on a stand. The craftsman stretches the glass with clamps to shape the fish's tail, then skillfully uses tweezers to form its fins and mouth, carefully refining each detail while the glass remains hot and pliable. The molten glass is collected on the end of a glass-blowing tube and removed from the furnace. The artisan places the glowing glass on a stand and rotates it several times to maintain its shape. He then inserts the hot glass into a cooling mold, briefly before removing it. Afterward, he resumes rotating the glass tube and uses tweezers to pull and shape the soft material. With careful movements, he stretches and forms the glass into the elegant figure of a horse. Each motion is deliberate, allowing the artist to precisely define the body, legs, and head of the glass horse. The process begins with heating the end of a thick, clear, soft glass rod, approximately 10 millimeters in diameter, preferably Lauscha clear, known for its stiffness and better heat control. The goal is to gather a substantial molten mass at the tip of the rod, ensuring it is as free from bubbles and scum as possible. The molten glass is allowed to droop under gravity before being pressed vertically onto a marvering surface to form a maria, a flattened disc that serves as the base for the flower design. The Maria must be perfectly centered on the rod and evenly flat, as misalignment will result in a crooked implosion. Once the disc is formed and cooled slightly, small dots of colored glass are applied to represent the stamen. These are placed at the center, with the option to be added later if a lower stamen profile is desired. Using a stringer made from a transparent dark purple encasing over a lighter core, curved petal shapes are laid around the stamen in the form of C-strokes. Each petal is placed individually, carefully spaced, so that none touch, crucial for clean separation during implosion. After completing the first ring of petals, typically 5, each petal is lightly pressed with a tool to embed it securely. A second and third layer of petals are then added in offset positions between the previous rows. These too are carefully spaced and shaped. Any excess stringer on the tips is pulled or trimmed off to maintain even thickness. Each petal is then tacked in with a light flame to prevent detachment. To initiate implosion, the outer clear edges of the Maria are selectively heated while keeping the central colored section relatively cool. By focusing heat only on the outer perimeter, the softened clear glass flows downward and around the colored pattern due to gravity. The glass is then gently pressed against a marver or paddle to flatten the base, which forces the heated clear glass inward and upward, carrying the petal pattern into the body of the pendant. This process is repeated, cyclically heating the outer edge, allowing it to droop, then pressing to maintain a flat base and initiate the implosion effect. Over time, the Maria thickens, its diameter reduces, and the flower pattern condenses and rises visibly within the clear lens. From a side view, the petals gradually taper into a central point at the base of the pendant. Once the implosion is sufficiently deep, a colored backing is applied here, Raven Sky. The color rod is twisted as it is applied to introduce organic variation in the pattern. This backing is fully fused and flattened. A punty of matching color is attached to the backing, the pendant is flipped, and the front is trimmed and shaped into a convex lens by melting and gravity forming while holding the piece vertically. A bail is formed by first melting a small clear dot at the top of the pendant, followed by shaping and piercing it into a loop. Finally, the artist may pull a small point at the bottom for tapering, which visually centers the flower and completes the piece. The process of making a crystal glass vase begins with sketching and designing the desired shape. Molten glass is gathered on a glass-blowing tube and layered with additional hot glass. It is then rolled on a glass roller and lightly blown to stabilize and cool. The piece is reheated in the furnace and removed again. While rotating the blowpipe evenly, the artisan uses clamps to shape the vase. The area requiring refinement is marked, then heated with a torch while rotating. Finally, a small amount of molten glass is added to the top and shaped carefully to complete the crystal glass vase.